Hi everyone, thanks for joining me for another development log for my indie game, The Affine. It's a 2D procedurally generated turn-based tactics RPG where you'll have the chance to explore diverse biomes, tame the wild creatures within them, and use their powers to engage in strategic grid combat. In this video, I'm really keen to talk you through some of the progress I've made laying the foundations for the basic combat mechanics of the game, as I try and think of the best way to organise all the ideas I have for different powers and abilities and things like different elements, stats, and techniques into a really balanced, rewarding, and ultimately, at the end of the day, strategic and interesting turn-based combat system. So, personally, the reason why I enjoy turn based strategy games is that at every possible turn, there is actually a correct or optimal choice, and picking the most optimal or advantageous choice at any particular turn generally makes you feel pretty smart because it shows that you have a deep understanding of the mechanics, and it's something you can generally improve at as you play the game more and learn to understand the different situations better. Critically, I think that while the turn-based style games do generally have a correct answer because at the end of the day they really just represent mathematical problems, the problems themselves are usually way too complex to really find the correct answer to in a short enough window of time that you'll realistically be taking for each turn of the game. And the games usually abstract enough away from the problem so that it does really come down to your intuition and you're not actually treating it as a maths problem. I think that some of the best turn-based strategy games are actually really simple at heart, and I can think of no better example than the timeless classic of chess, which is probably one of the original turn-based grid tactics games. In chess, there's no hit points, no complicated mechanics such as buffs or boosts or stats, and every piece on the board is killed or removed when one of the other pieces attacks it. But yet, this game has captivated generations of people and is something that people dedicate their lives to. A more recent example of a turn-based tactics game that I really enjoy would have to be Into the Breach, which does a fantastic job at sticking to its core mechanics, whilst also not overcomplicating the gameplay with unnecessary fluff or abstraction. And I think it really shows that the best tactics games actually play more like puzzle games than combat games. Into the Breach has meaningful information with small, finite integer values. For example, 1 unit of damage or health is very meaningful as each particular unit only has a few units of hit points. Furthermore, Into the Breach has what's considered perfect information because at every possible turn, you can reliably predict exactly what's going to happen because there's no random number generation. For the combat mechanics of the Affine, I really want to focus on emergent complexity, where from a very simple set of rules and mechanics, a huge and diverse range of different scenarios are able to possibly unfold throughout your playthrough. As I alluded to before, there's going to be no random number generation in the Affine, and the combat style is going to be designed in a way that rewards strategic thought rather than just spamming the most powerful moves. As you explore the world, you'll encounter areas where you can engage in combat with wild creatures. At the beginning of combat, all the creatures in the battle will be added to a turn queue, and after each turn, they'll successively be re-added into the turn queue based on their speed stat. The turn economy is going to be important in this game, and you'll be able to manipulate the way that your creatures actually participate in the turn queue through giving them instructions such as waiting and performing attacks that take longer than one turn. There's also going to be many support and passive ways to manipulate the battlefield and damage your opponents, and Those are going to take place through a series of elemental effects and status effects. The game is going to actually involve not only the party members and the enemies, but also the environment and environmental features such as rocks, trees, etc., which you can see scattered around the battlefield. Elemental effects are going to act as a kind of proxy, so that heat applied from a fireball technique can burn a shrub or some foliage, as well as inflict a burn status effect on an enemy creature. There's going to be a range of different status effects you can apply to your opponents, and some of those that are already in the game include stun, bleed, burn, and more. A lot of these status effects are actually in the game, however, their full effects haven't necessarily all been clarified or implemented yet. For example, it's pretty intuitive that a stun status effect might delay a creature's re-entry to the turn queue, or essentially make it so it takes longer for them to perform their next action. However, due to the logic with the data structures under the hood, I haven't quite got that hooked up yet with the many queues that I have on queuing and dequeuing in the background. As you can see, I've also made some improvements to the visuals of the in-battle UI. For instance, down the bottom left, there's a more informative tooltip and hub with all of your possible techniques and some information about the techniques themselves and the creature using them. There's an action log in the top left, and the turn queue and the wait queue over to the right. But yeah, so to sum it all up, the main improvements for this latest sprint are really just improvements to the actual battle mechanics, and then some improvements to the user interface to actually communicate that to the player. Throughout development, I've found that the two hardest things to really know are when you're finished a particular thing and what to work on next. And funnily enough, it often works out being a combination of the two, as well as a deep acceptance of the fact that you could always improve something in some way, shape, or form. But looking ahead, I've now got some decent combat mechanics happening, and I think I'm ready to start working on the progression systems. I've already implemented things like stats and skill trees, and I'm now keen to just tie that into some kind of experience points based system so I can start unlocking new techniques and leveling up the creatures in my party. It was really good to get that first game loop finished in the last sprint, which was covered in the last development log, and I'm now just really looking forward to improving on that and making the experience better as I really build towards hopefully some kind of a playable demo in the near future, potentially before the end of this year. So if that sounds interesting to you, I really hope you stick around and continue to follow the project. It's been a lot of effort over the past months and, overall couple of years, and there's big things to come. So please hit that subscribe button and you won't be disappointed. Cheers, and see you in the next one. Thanks, guys.